But right here, buddy, that's a tattoo.
Wow, that's David Dunham.
Fact or fiction?
Eric Dungey had no chance away. Flips it to Watkins again.
This is the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show, presented by Pump Monkey Septic Services.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 14 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. Today is Thursday, November 23rd. It's officially Rivalry Week. I'm your host, Drew Archer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Johnson. How's it going, Matthew?
It's going great. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I don't remember. Did we release an episode on Thanksgiving last year?
We recorded one that week. I don't know that we might have waited till Friday to post it. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, welcome in, everybody, for the Thanksgiving special of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. We have nothing really special for Thanksgiving planned, but a lot special for Rivalry Week.
It's the best week of the college football season, in my opinion. I don't know about you, but looking at the matchups for our pick'em contests, this was maybe the hardest week to make some picks for with all these. Because, I mean, no matter how good or bad one team is, you can throw the record books out when rivals get together. So I personally felt it was difficult to make some picks this week.
I agree. It was pretty much the same thought process for me. Like you might have teams like Auburn, Alabama that are completely on different ends of the spectrum this season, but you know Auburn's going to play Alabama better than they did New Mexico State, and it's just the nature of the rivalry. So it was tough. There's even one I was looking at, like Louisville, Kentucky. But that one, I don't know. Kentucky's going to show up for the rivalry game.
Yeah. A little look into what we're going to discuss this week. We're going to review Clemson's win. We're going to some of the other notable games. One I had on here was that New Mexico State-Auburn game. We'll discuss our Twitter poll this week, which was what is more likely to happen this Saturday. The options were Clemson blowout win, Leggett gets shut down, turnover-free game for Clemson, or Trump loathes Columbia. So we'll discuss that here in a little bit. Also joining the show, the oh-so-popular with the Clemson fan base, Chris Phillips of the Spurs Up Show will join us to discuss the rivalry matchup this Saturday in Columbia. And as always, we'll do fact or fiction, give you our picks for the week, and then preview the Clemson-South Carolina game. So, big Thanksgiving episode.
Let's get into North Carolina.
Yeah, let's get into it. What were your initial takeaways from the Tigers' 31-20 victory against the Tar Heels?
Well, first, I wanted to give an apology to all of our followers on Twitter because I did tweet profanities on Saturday at the game. So I apologize for that. And no, we're usually a clean broadcast and brand, but emotions were getting the better of us, or at least me, on Saturday. So, but it was a good time. I had a great time at the game. I rewatched the first half today, and I wouldn't recommend it. I would definitely recommend rewatching the second half. But my biggest thing is, why did we hand the ball to Tyler Davis and think he can run off tackle? Like, I get that Dabo, it was senior day and he wanted to give, like a 6-year player his time to shine. But if we're going to hand it to him, let's put him at fullback and get ahead of steam going and not try to make him run 6 yards to gain 2.
That was absolutely baffling.
Another play that was really baffling was towards the end of the game when North Carolina scored to make it 20-31, and then they decided to go for 2 there. At that point, I know we had separated and moved to sit with our respective parents, but it didn't make any sense. Nobody in our section understood it because if you get it, you're still down a touchdown and a field goal. And maybe the field goal wins it at that point, but you still are down 2 possessions, and it just doesn't really make sense. There's not any gain for the risk to me.
Yeah. There were a couple, as we've seen this season, some baffling coaching decisions, especially that fake punt there. in the first half, and Dabo was quoted as saying after the game that they'd made a decision they were going to do that regardless of what the down and distance was, if I remember correctly. So that one, that first half, especially with the way the first half ended, the Tigers were fortunate to get into the end zone. I don't know that Cade actually got into the end zone. There's been a lot of speculation back and forth. If that run right there at the half was not initially called a touchdown, I don't think they review it, return it either. So that first half, there was quite a few decisions. There were some head scratchers.
Yeah, it honestly didn't really make sense. But one other thing that happened in the first half that we definitely need to talk about is the Nate Wiggins play, where I believe his name was like Earl Hampton or last name Hampton. Their running back broke off a long one in the first quarter, maybe second quarter. But Nate Wiggins chases him down from like 15 yards behind him, strips it at the 1, and we get the ball back on the 20, which to the point in that game was our best starting field position was at the 20, because before that we started after the fumble that UNC had inside the goal line or inside the 10, and then they punted the next possession that pinned us like at the 2. So this Nate Wiggins play really saved the game, because can you imagine the difference in the game if we go down 14-0 early? But Nate Wiggins saving that play really changed the momentum and the track of the rest of the game. So I think it was a great team win and a team effort for this one, and I think it's going to take that the remainder of the season to get another win.
Yeah, that Wiggins play was a game changer. I saw it was put out this week that it maxed out at 22 miles an hour on that run, chasing him down, and got there just in the nick of time to get the ball out just before he crossed the goal line, get a favorable bounce out the end zone so the Tigers get a touchback. But a huge play there. One
more thing about that, you mentioned that he got up to 22 miles an hour or something like that. I remember it was at least like 0.23 miles per hour short or slower than the fastest recorded time in the NFL, like on-field time in the NFL this season, which was Tyreek Hill. So that's good company to be in, that you can, it might not show on a 40-yard dash or something like that, but that's the type of play on film that coaches will know, and that he made money on that play.
Oh yeah. Good company to be in. Tyreek Hill equals fast. So the Tigers improved to 40-19-1 all time against North Carolina. North Carolina became the 6th program to be defeated by Clemson at least 40 times. Other teams included in that list are South Carolina with 72, Wake Forest 71, NC State with 60, Furman 44, and Virginia 40. Clemson earned its 6th consecutive victory against the Tar Heels, dating back to 2011. The Tigers improved to 15-3 at home against AP top 25 teams since 2011. Clemson's now 80-3 when rushing for 200 or more yards. Chris Phillips and I get in about that stat. That's going to be a huge key to the game against South Carolina this week. North Carolina entered the week ranked 8th in the nation in points per game with 39.9 points a game. By surrendering only 20 points, Clemson held the Tar Heels' prolific offense to nearly half its season average. The 20 points were North Carolina's fewest this season and fewest since Clemson held them to 10 points in last year's ACC championship game. And the Tigers held North Carolina quarterback Drake May to 44.4% completion percentage. He was 16 of 36. That was the lowest of his career. On the Clemson side of the ball, Cade Klubnik was 21 for 32 with 219 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions. He also carried the ball 12 times for 44 yards. And speaking of rushing, Will Shipley and Phil Mafah had big games. Shipley, 18 rushes for 126 yards. Mafah, 23 rushes for 84 yards. Clemson recorded its 2nd takeaway of the game in the first quarter. You talked about it. Nate Wiggins, saved a touchdown after a 63-yard downfield run there. It was the 2nd time this season Wiggins has chased down a ball carrier from behind to force a fumble at the Tigers' 1-yard line. Those plays account for both of Wiggins' 2 career forced fumbles. And Wiggins also helped seal the victory with an interception late there in the fourth quarter. The interception was the third of Wiggins' career and his second all-time against North Carolina, including last year's against North Carolina in the ACC championship.
Yeah, I wanted to run back to that, what you mentioned about Cade not throwing an interception. I had forgot this. I think I might have headed towards the tunnels for halftime at this point, but Cade did technically throw an interception on the final drive where he scored with 1 second left in the half. There was an interception there. He threw it directly to the safety in the middle of the field, but we kind of got bailed out there on a roughing the passer penalty. It was a questionable one, but there were a couple questionable calls / no calls both ways in this game, so I think it balanced out. But 0 interceptions on the stat sheet is a little deceiving.
Yeah. So we turn the page, talk about some other notable games. The South Carolina Gamecocks, Clemson's next opponent. I'll be honest, this is probably the most I've watched South Carolina in this game since week 1 when they lost to North Carolina. The Gamecocks win at home 17-14. Reason I put this on here, something that kind of concerned me, was the way that South Carolina's defense holding up running backs, receivers, trying to punch the ball out. They were successful a handful of times, creating turnovers, and that has been a big weakness for Clemson. But South Carolina escaped with another win and one win away from bowl eligibility.
Yeah, they kind of barely got out of that one. They had to put together a game-winning drive. It might have only been in the third or middle of the fourth quarter, but they were down, I believe, majority of that game and had to put together a drive to score and then hold Kentucky the rest of the game. But I'm not too worried about it. Kentucky's offense is far from prolific. So is ours, but I think we have a little bit more talent and more creativity in moving the ball than Kentucky does. So I'm not too worried about it. It was a good win for South Carolina. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but Drew, that puts South Carolina within 1 win of your preseason pick. And So to get that win,
they got to beat the Tigers. Only other notable game I have on here, and this was partly because of a conversation I had with your dad at the tailgate. Before the game, I was telling him, I was like, Auburn's going to give Alabama a run for their money next week. That's going to be a tight game, and Auburn could trip up the Crimson Tide there, and then they go and pay New Mexico State $1.8 million to come to Auburn, Alabama, and lose 31-10. So a huge loss for the Tigers there on the Plains.
Yeah, I wonder if Auburn got caught looking ahead. I still think that they're going to be able to play Alabama closer than a lot of people are expecting just because of that rivalry factor we've already mentioned. But this is not a good look for the other Tigers out there.
Something else that's not a good look is having septic tank issues. If you need your septic tank pumped or just need someone to come out and check it, Pump Monkey Septic Service is your first phone call. You can reach them at 864-710-2211. They're owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell, and they're servicing the upstate. That's just not an issue you want to have. So give them a call, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey.
Twitter polls.
All right, our Twitter poll of the week. If you do not already, follow us on Twitter at Nachos_analysis. We've got quite a few followers this week with the back and forth with South Carolina fans. So if you're a listener and you don't follow us, what are you doing with your life? Give us a follow. So this week's poll was, what is more likely to happen this Saturday? Options were Clemson blowout win, Leggett gets shut down, turnover-free game for Clemson, or Trump loathes Columbia. Matthew, what are your thoughts here?
Well, when I answered this question, the answer to number 4 was a little different, so mine might be a little different than what the Twitter people got. But I think the most likely is Xavier Legette getting shut down. I think we have the talent in the secondary to be able to throw different DBs at him, keep our DBs fresh, and keep him tired and shut down. I know we're probably going to have Wiggins matched up with him most of the game, but there were a few plays in the North Carolina game where Khalil Barnes gets matched up against Tez Walker and is able to run with him and make a play. So I'm feeling confident about our secondary, and with that being the strength of the South Carolina team, I'm feeling okay about this game. But in order of likeliness, I think Xavier Legette getting shut down is number 1, then the Clemson blowout, then the turnover-free option. And the option when I made my list was that Trump makes an appearance in 5 points, or that he goes there and enjoys it, or something like that. So I put that as the least likely because that is a Secret Service nightmare.
Hand up. I originally had that in the Google Doc and then decided to change it when I posted it on Twitter, and I completely forgot to go back into our show notes.
that the way I was originally worded made me imagine what it would be like to have Donald Trump in 5 points. So I'll put a image up on the screen of an AI generated image because I liked that thought. Like, no, even if I picked it as my last option, I think just the idea of it happening would be really funny. So here's a picture on the screen right now of Donald Trump in 5 points.
I don't think a blowout win's happening. It could. We just hadn't seen the Tigers be able to pull something like that off yet. You really haven't put together a complete game yet. I think Legette getting shut down is a possibility. I admit this with Chris Phillips. I hadn't watched a whole lot of South Carolina football. If you just go based off what South Carolina fans are saying on Twitter, it's basically the next coming of Jerry Rice. So who knows what we're going to see there. Clemson is definitely not having a turnover-free game. So I'm going with Trump loathes Columbia, because who does not love to hate on Columbia, South Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta give it to him. You gotta give Trump a little bit of credit there because he is making an appearance in Columbia, South Carolina, and that's something that I don't wish on anybody.
No. A couple listener responses. Stuart Bernhardt gets in and says that 1, 2, and 4 are highly probable, which those are Clemson blowout win, Legette gets shut down, and Trump lows Columbia. He does not see a turnover-free game happening. And then Dr. Cornstarch, maybe the Twitter handle of the week, kind of go hand in hand, and I agree. Big part of Clemson's success defensively is shutting down Legette and getting pressure on Spencer Rattler. So shout out to everybody who voted this week, and be sure to join us next week to get in on the Twitter poll. All right, next coming up, Chris Phillips from the Spurs Up Show. All right, today we're joined by Chris Phillips of the Spurs Up Show. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Drew, I appreciate it, man. It's always a pleasure. I know you and I were just talking off air. It's one of the best weeks of the year. I'd probably argue the best week of the college football season, not just South Carolina Clemson, but rivalry weekend, all of the great games, and so many teams will either salvage their seasons or spin into a state of despair and depression probably for the next 9 months or so. Somebody phrased it to me, well, somebody's going to lay on silk sheets this offseason and somebody's going to lay on a bed of nails. That's kind of what it feels like. Determine whether you win or lose this game. But Drew, it's always a pleasure to chat with you guys, and looking forward to it.
Absolutely. That was going to be my first point of this is probably the best week of the college football season every year. What does this rivalry with Clemson and South Carolina mean to you?
Oh, I mean, it's everything. It's huge. I mean, it's what it means to the people in this state. You know, you grow up with it. It gets in your blood early. I mean, you can't be a fan of the Gamecocks or Tigers without hating the other side, right? I mean, it comes with the territory. So I was born and raised in North Augusta, South Carolina, right on the border of South Carolina and Georgia. So, you know, it was a mix. I grew up with buddies that were South Carolina fans, a lot of them were Clemson fans, Georgia fans. Heck, I hated Georgia just as much, if not more than Clemson growing up, because Georgia, was so much better than South Carolina and Clemson. And I just have nightmares of David Pollock and David Green and what those guys did to the Gamecocks year after year. But man, it was just always so much fun as a kid. I remember vivid memories of this week. As we sit here on Thanksgiving Eve, right, the day before Thanksgiving. I remember me and my buddies, we'd always get together in North Augusta on that Friday, the day before the game, and have a flag football game. And the Carolina guys are on one side, the Clemson guys are on the other. We'd play NCAA football against each other. I'd get South Carolina, they'd get Clemson. We'd have epic duels on there. Like, it bled into everything. Like, South Carolina, Clemson bled into everything. We'd be throwing the football, just on an off day at the summer day, whatever, we're talking trash to each other. Like, I'll never forget my buddy. I throw him the ball. He catches it. He's like, that's James Davis for a touchdown. I catch the ball. That's Sidney Rice. Like, you're just constantly going back and forth. And, you look now in your adult life, man. I mean, literally, there are relationships that are houses divided. There are friendships where people don't talk for a week or two. They don't talk the week before, week after the game. Coworkers. I mean, you name it, man. It's just, it's a really cool thing. It's hatred. I think there's also a mutual respect, but this rivalry plays second fiddle to no one. It's cool to be a part of, for sure.
Absolutely. And with it being my favorite week of the year, Twitter is always alive this week every year. We've had some fun with it already this year. I know you have. We've thrown out random things about Alec Murdoch and the freaking Hootie and the Blowfish, and it's gotten people all riled up. So it's always
the Darius Rucker one really got your timeline busy. That one did.
Yes, but earlier this week, speaking of Twitter, you posted about the mental edge that during that 7-year streak that Clemson had, and I would say that the Gamecocks had that during that 5-year streak. What has changed over the last few years? It doesn't seem like any team right now has a mental edge.
Well, Drew, I think the most important thing that happened is South Carolina won last year. I mean, that's you can say and do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't win the football game, there's this feeling of, to your point, I'll never forget being in Williams-Brice Stadium, 2013. South Carolina won the 5th in a row against Clemson. And I remember leaving the stadium feeling like South Carolina's never going to lose these guys again, because it was just like this. Everything that could go wrong with the Tigers did go wrong. Everything that could go right did go right. I'm sure you recall that 13 game, dude. It was fumble after mistake after blunder. And I remember Dabo just being dejected in postgame talking about it. And it's like, we just can't beat these guys. We can't hold onto the football. We can't, do anything right. And then that 7-year stretch comes. And I mean, Clemson was the way more talented team. I think that was the biggest difference. But you get to a feeling to where mentally you're so defeated and you're like, we just can't beat these guys. So, I think when you're building a program and you get better players, right, they bring a sense of belief and they bring a sense of confidence, like, hey, we're supposed to win this game. We don't hope to win this game. And I think when that plays out and that happens on the field, I mean, you look at last year, man, I think I was one of very few, if not the only one, Gamecock that went on record and picked South Carolina to win that game. And over the summer, I just felt like, the Gamecocks are going to have the advantage at quarterback for the first time in, basically a decade. And thank goodness it played out that way. I wasn't sure it was going to, during the season last year, but you win that game. And I think the downfall of Clemson too, man. I mean, let's just call it what it is. I mean, Clemson's 7-4 right now. Some of the things that Dabo has dealt with, the energy from the fan base, the calling of his job from some to that point, like, it's not typical Clemson anymore. So I think South Carolina, even though this has been a rough season for them, since the Muschamp days, no doubt, the program has ascended. It's taken a couple steps forward. I think the Clemson program, since Trevor Lawrence left, has taken a couple steps back. And I don't know that anybody would disagree with that. And again, I say all that, Drew, not to say like that's going to be the difference in who wins the game. But to your point, I don't think one side is coming in this game on Saturday feeling defeated before the ball is even kicked off, because that's what that mental edge does. And, I think that's a healthy place for the rivalry to be. I mean, I've talked to Clemson fans when they say, like, it wasn't even fun for them 2016, 17, 18, 19, where it's just like, it is fun, but it's like the game's not even competitive. It's not even a rivalry at that point, it feels like. So to have that juice, to have that energy back in it, and, I think winning last year, obviously getting the job done, because if you'd have lost that game, Drew, and you'd have lost 8 in a row, all we'd have been talking about all offseason was, when will South Carolina beat Clemson again? Instead, It's can the Gamecocks get back-to-back wins? That makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Admittedly, I have not watched a lot of South Carolina football this season, but all week on Twitter, all I've seen Carolina fans talking about Xavier Legette. Is the matchup with Legette and Wiggins the defining matchup in this game?
It's been very entertaining, Drew, to see. I mean, since Sunday, the Legette-Wiggins chatter, trash talk, banter, it has been wildly entertaining. It's a matchup I'm really excited about, Drew, and I think it's an intriguing matchup, no doubt, and I think one that will go a long way in deciding the game, but I don't think that's the matchup end-all, be-all. Xavier Legette can beat his man off the line or win that matchup more times than not. But if South Carolina, and I know it's so boring to talk about, and we repeated this week after week, but if South Carolina can't hold their own in the trenches, if they can't slow down the Clemson running game, and they cannot protect, have some semblance of balance in the running game themselves offensively, and give Spencer Rattler time to operate, what Xavier Legette does is not going to matter. I mean, I say this, Drew, respectfully, but this season, for Gamecock fans, Clemson fans, and college football fans, just observers as a whole, this season should teach us the value or lack thereof of a star wide receiver. Here's what I mean by that. Juice Wells hasn't played all year. Most people thought if Juice Wells didn't play, this team was destined for an abysmal season. It still hasn't been a good season, but Drew, South Carolina hasn't lost games because Xavier Legette got shut down. They've lost games because they couldn't protect Rattler. They couldn't run the football. They had no big uglies. I mean, you go back to the season opener against UNC, Rattler is sacked 9 times. It wouldn't have mattered if Juice was out there, Jerry Rice. It wouldn't have mattered who was catching passes, right? So that's where it starts and ends for South Carolina if they can win in the trenches. My magic number, Drew, for the Gamecocks rushing, if they get to 70 or more yards, I think they win. And then I don't have a number defensively, but you got to limit Shipley and Mafah enough to where Clemson's success is determined by what Cade Klubnik does. Because I think you ask anybody out there, Gamecock or Tiger, if this game comes down to Rattler against Klubnik, that favors South Carolina. I think that's safe to say. So Legette versus Wiggins is a really big one. And listen, Rattler and Legette have to be special, I think, for South Carolina to have the offensive output they need to win this game. But the matchup is up front, that great Clemson defensive line. And then South Carolina's D-line, who looked good against Kentucky but has been lackluster most of the season. Can they get in the backfield, have some tackles for loss, create some big plays, slow down the run game, and maybe force Cade Klubnik into mistakes? That's where this game will be won and lost.
You mentioned that game against Kentucky. As one of the few I did get to see, I watched the second half, and something that really worried me as a Clemson fan was watching the defenders there for South Carolina punching the ball out. That turnovers have been a huge issue for Clemson this season, and South Carolina's ability to create turnovers and Clemson's discipline, I think, is one of the more understated keys to this game.
Yeah, Drew, Carolina's been much better of late in that regard. 10 turnovers they forced in the last 3 weeks, which is by far better than any sort of pace they were on before that. And certainly playing, Jacksonville State and Vanderbilt will help boost those numbers maybe. But, I mean, Drew, a lot of turnovers is like momentum. It's just they come in bunches, and it doesn't matter who the opponent is. Once you have that sort of sense of belief on defense that they're going to come to you, it happens more often than not. And certainly that cultivated with the game against Kentucky, and the defense was extremely opportunistic. And without those big plays they make, South Carolina doesn't win that football game. And, of course, you mentioned, and all the Tiger fans listen to this know, 20 turnovers for Clemson this season, 13 fumbles lost, just can't hold on to the football. Clemson's got to lead the country in fumbles inside the 5-yard line. That is just baffling to me what has happened there. But it's going to be a huge part of the game. It really is, Drew. I look at this. I think South Carolina to win the football game probably needs to be +2 in the turnover margin, realistically, because I do think Clemson is just still a more talented team than South Carolina. So, if all things are equal, I think Clemson wins the game. But if South Carolina is able to go out there, do what they did last weekend, and Clemson, for whatever reason, is turning the football over, well, all bets are off. And I know that's such low-hanging fruit because it's like, well, no, duh, turnover margin decides a game. But especially in a game like this where you have one team that literally has a turnover in every game it's played, and then a South Carolina defense that, while they have not been good this year, they're coming on of late, they're coming on strong towards end of season. That certainly, especially if we get like a turnover early, you see South Carolina or Clemson turn the football over early. The momentum goes one way or the other. It's going to be big in this one.
You mentioned from a personal standpoint what this rivalry meant to you, but Big Game Boomer, who also likes to get people riled up on Twitter, had this matchup, I believe the second best in-state rivalry in the nation. Where do you think the Carolina-Clemson rivalry ranks amongst all the nation's college football rivalries?
Yeah, and I'm going to take my bias out of it, Drew, realistically, because, I mean, it'd be really easy to say Carolina-Clemson is the best, but I think you got to give credit to Ohio State, Michigan, the game. I think that's one that it does matter the fact those teams are both basically every single year really, really good, and there's something even more than the rivalry that's at stake and on the line. I'd probably put the Iron Bowl, Bama-Auburn, number 2. I mean, again, it's just I could be biased here, but that one speaks for itself. The great memories in the Iron Bowl, it feels like every other year that game, or it used to at least, come down to the SEC West. But I'd put South Carolina Clemson. I think it's a top 5 rivalry. I mean, I'd put it probably third behind those two. And I mean, Drew, taking it from, outside of just football, I mean, I'm sure and I know how you feel about the South Carolina Clemson baseball rivalry. I think that one's the best in all of college baseball. So, it's certainly up there, man. I think it's one of the top 5. I'd put it 3 behind the game and the Iron Bowl. And again, there are others that are great rivalries that you can think of out there that their fan bases would have a complaint or gripe about that. But certainly South Carolina Clemson, I mean, it plays second fiddle to nobody, and the passion, the electricity, the fact that in the state of South Carolina there are no pro sports. Like, you're either garnet and black or you're orange and purple. And to steal a line from the Bama Auburn documentary a couple years ago, if you're neither one of those, they both hate you, right? So it's it's for real, man. And it separates households, separates relationships, and it's one of the best in college football and college sport as well, no doubt.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I definitely rank Ohio State, Michigan, and Auburn, Alabama ahead of Clemson, South Carolina. It just means a lot here in this state, and specifically to baseball. I definitely agree. I think it's the best baseball rivalry. Wednesday, you put out your pick or your score prediction for the matchup with South Carolina and Clemson. You have the Tigers winning 27-20. How do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, Drew, and admittedly, that was a painful pick to make, but I'm somebody, man. I mean, I keep it real. I keep it genuine. I keep it authentic. I'm not going to go with my heart and garnet glasses. Especially in this game, you got to remove the bias and the heart, because the heart's going to say that your favorite team is going to win no matter what, right? No matter what the odds are. And again, last year, I mean, I wasn't necessarily picking with my heart. I just really felt like and believed, you know what? South Carolina, easy advantage at quarterback. That's going to make all the difference. I got into the week of that game and said, you know what? You just beat Tennessee. There's been some adjustments made. And I really felt good in that pick. I did. So, if I felt it, I would pick it. But I look at this game, I admittedly, Drew, I never thought, take you back a couple weeks ago after the Jacksonville State game, we were dejected. That was a game that South Carolina easily could have lost. It was a win that felt like a loss, admittedly, especially after you lost 4 in a row, came home and looked pathetic. And I just, I said I'd put good money on it that South Carolina will not win out. They will not make a bowl game. And so I never thought this team was going to do that. I'm really genuinely concerned about what I saw from the offense against Kentucky, because all we heard all season and all we saw was South Carolina be dominant on the offensive side, in each of their respective contests. But, I mean, you look back after the Kentucky game, you say to yourself, okay, was it the competition, or is South Carolina really elite at home? Because Furman, Mississippi State, Florida, Jacksonville State, and Vanderbilt are the teams that Spencer Rattler and the Gamecocks offense torched. Then comes Kentucky. They shut you down. And Drew, I don't think it's a hot take. Clemson's defense is a lot better than Kentucky's. Like, their defensive line, their linebackers, everything. This is an improved Clemson secondary as well. I do think Clemson, I don't think they can go a game without turning the football over. So, I think there's going to be a turnover that happens. The difference is I think Clemson is going to get 1 or 2 of their own. I think Spencer Rattler is going to be in a point where he's going to be running for his life. I just don't see a way that South Carolina establishes any semblance of a running game, has any semblance of balance to where they're keeping themselves out of these 3rd and long situations where Rattler's got to play Superman. And you would have to think the Clemson defense, is going to key in on 17. They're going to key in on Xavier Legette and say, somebody else has got to have a big night. We're not going to let this guy beat us. They're going to take away South Carolina's top option. I could see that leading to Spencer Rattler forcing some things, making some mistakes. I'm not saying he's going to play terribly, but one or two mistakes in this game is all it takes to cost you. So I know the Gamecocks have the home field advantage. I totally get that. Willie B will be a madhouse, but Drew, doesn't it seem as if, and the stats reflect this, the road team has had a lot of success in this series. And so I look at this game, South Carolina was able to be opportunistic and overcome being deficient on both lines of scrimmage against Kentucky. I just don't think they can do that 2 weeks in a row. I think the thing that's been the Achilles heel for South Carolina all season will be one more time, that being the offensive line, also the run defense, which has been much better this year because the secondary took such a major stop. I just don't think South Carolina is going to have enough of an answer for Will Shipley and Mafah, especially Shipley, who has torched South Carolina defensively throughout his first two seasons of the rivalry. Also, we recall last year, why did Clemson lose that game? One of the reasons was they stopped feeding Will Shipley. I don't think Clemson makes that mistake again. I think it's a really hard-fought, close game, but I think Clemson's just got a little bit more than South Carolina. They win in the most important area, which is the trenches. I think revenge factor could play a factor, but Clemson will get the revenge, and that's why I've got the Tigers getting a 7-point win.
Yeah, you bring up the success that the road team has 4 out of the last 5 years. The road team's won 3 years in a row. Tigers look to do that this week. You mentioned Will Shipley. I think that's a big key to the game as well. The running game, Clemson is 80-3 when they rush for 200-plus yards under Dabo Swinney. So that and turnovers is the key in my mind for this game. Before I let you go, switching gears, you brought up baseball a minute ago. The schedule was released last week, I believe, and that middle game between Clemson and South Carolina does not have a location yet, which has sparked a lot of conversation on Twitter. What are your thoughts on how these two programs should navigate that middle game of the series? Because there's a lot of opinions. A lot of Clemson fans hate that game at Segra Park. I don't know. Me personally, I don't have an issue with it. Both teams get the opportunity at the same amount of tickets. It limits travel time for both of the teams. So what's your thoughts on that?
Drew, it's a great question. You're right. It's a great debate, too, because and the reason we're having this conversation, let's call it for what it is and take some ownership, because when South Carolina started losing to Clemson at Fluor Field after 2012, right, 2013 and beyond, and Clemson started getting the better of South Carolina, Gamecock fans started complaining more and more and more that, hey, that's a home field advantage for Clemson. It's 60-40 Tigers. And I'm just here to say, man, just to keep it real, like I was at the game, I believe, in 2011 when they played at Fluor Field. And, I mean, I can tell you when South Carolina was really, really good, it was 50-50 at worst, if not 60-40 South Carolina. So let's just, it's kind of funny because Fluor Field's a fantastic venue. And, again, I know Gamecock fans don't necessarily want it 30 minutes from Clemson's campus. I get it. Drew, I'm biased. I'm from North Augusta. There's a beautiful ballpark in North Augusta, South Carolina that would truly serve as a neutral site venue. I know a lot of people want to move it to Charleston. I mean, the problem with that is it's just such an incredible travel from the upstate to get down to Charleston for a baseball game. So you want to make it as convenient as possible. I like the switching every year of Fluor Field and Segra Park. I don't have any problem with that. Like, it doesn't bother me, Drew, one way or the other, as somebody who watches the series and loves it. It doesn't necessarily make me feel like one team's got the advantage over the other. Heck, I had this theory before, Drew, and people really are going to hate this. You know what I think? Let's just go back to the old days. We'll play 3 at Clemson this year. We'll play 3 at South Carolina next year. You want to make all things fair? I mean, why not? But no, I think there's some good alternate location ballparks for it. I mean, I think North Augusta would be good. I mean, if you really want to venture to Charlotte, although I don't know that you want to take South Carolina Clemson out of the Palmetto State, or people could just get over themselves and we could go back to Segra and Fluor Field. And I mean, both are beautiful venues. And, I think we had it pretty good when that was happening. So it'll be interesting to see what they do though, Drew. But I mean, either way, man, nothing's going to take away from the beauty and the majesty of that rivalry.
Absolutely. My only complaint with Fluor Field and Segra is the TV production when games are played there. It's absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. For sure. I mean, I know people, I don't know, man. Like, I know people hate it, but I really would not have a problem with this year, the series, the 3-game sets at Founders Park. Next year, it's at Doug Kingsmore. Like, I could live with that. I think immediately, though, we would miss the back and forth neutral site stuff. But, I mean, it's just an idea. That's all I'm saying. So
Yeah. The way they do it.
As long as they don't move it back to where we're playing on Tuesdays, 4 midweek games scattered throughout the season, that is just not grand enough for how great that rivalry is. Like, that needs to be a weekend series. That needs to be a series in which, like, it has this super regional feel, and you just can't get that feel like a Tuesday midweek. I mean, I know Clemson, Georgia is really cool during that time, but South Carolina Clemson is different. It needs to be on its own stage, but I do agree with you that the production quality of those games is rough, to say the least.
If you're not at the game, it's hard to watch. And I've been to games at both Segra and Floor Field, both great stadiums, a great time. One of the things that makes the rivalry series that much better. But Chris, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you giving of your time, and look forward to a good rivalry game this weekend.
Drew, looking forward to it, man. Best of luck to you guys, and happy Thanksgiving to you and all those who were tuned in. Appreciate y'all.
Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving. All right. Thanks to Chris for joining the show. If you don't already, which I'm sure if you're on Twitter, you have seen him. You may not follow him, but give him a follow. A lot of great content. Always a good source to go to for Gamecock information. And we'll be talking to him. Won't be long for the baseball series in March. So shout out to him for joining us and taking some time this holiday week.
Fact or fiction?
All right. Fact or fiction? I'll go with this first one. These last two are yours, Matthew. But fact or fiction, Xavier Legette is the second coming of Jerry Rice.
I think this is a bona fide fact. It's honestly pretty crazy that the NFL didn't make an exception for him to let him declare out of high school. I think it's a disservice to the league and the sport of football as a whole to have such a talented player compete against amateurs in college football, and it really just challenges the entire integrity of the sport that we thought we had in college football. So this is big facts.
Yeah, the NFL depriving us of Legette and forcing us to watch people like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce is just ridiculous. But no, I'm going to go big fiction here. But it has been very entertaining seeing Clemson fans and South Carolina fans going back and forth on Twitter. Because if I didn't know anything about this game, anything about either of these teams or this person, I feel like I should be scared, because the way they're talking about him is he's just this unhuman person that's just going to blow the doors off of Clemson.
It's like, I mean, it's not that surprising. I feel like every time South Carolina has like that one athlete on their team, it's always like, this is the second coming of Christ. So not that out of the window, but fact or fiction, Drew is secretly cheering for South Carolina because it will give him one of his preseason picks if they win.
Big fiction here. I hate the Gamecock for putting me in this situation. I'm just ready to go ahead and wave the white flag on that preseason pick. I'm just going to go ahead and admit defeat. That will not happen, because I will be rooting hard for the Tigers. Not a ounce in my body will be rooting for the Gamecocks to win this game.
Yeah, I said fiction also. The lead is too comfortable in the pick'em contest. But fact or fiction, last one of the week. Back-to-back losses to South Carolina would signal the beginning of the end for the Dabo Swinney era in Clemson.
I'm going to say fiction on this. This has been thrown out. I know Ryan Cantor's talked about it on Twitter. I've seen some other people discuss it. I'm worried that the way that the Tigers have finished this stretch of the season, and this is assuming maybe Clemson wins this game against South Carolina, you finish with that 4-game win streak. Does that cause Dabo to get a little more comfortable? Does that change how he feels about potential coaching changes that earlier in the season basically seemed inevitable? So, no, I don't think a loss would be the end of the Dabo era, because I think that will definitely reassure those thoughts and would assist getting some of these coaches out of here, maybe bringing in some guys to the transfer portal.
Yeah, that's a good reason. I honestly don't know. I did some research on this question because I was trying to convince myself one way or the other. So this is what I came up with research. If Dabo loses this year, he will be 8-7 all time against USC, and that's a little too close. Take away the 7-year win streak we just got off of from them, and we have a horrible record against them, or Dabo does at least. So, especially right now, like, I kind of understand the Spurrier, like, he was kind of in Dabo's head a little bit and would always take jabs at him, but you have a brand new coach in here that's 1-0 against you right now, and Shane Beamer, and if Dabo, I think if he wants to stay the coach here, beating South Carolina is maybe one of the biggest factors in that, because if you can't do that, then you're not going to be here for very long. So, if you take away the Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson years, he has like a 1-8 record or 1-7 record against USC, which, I mean, I know a lot of South Carolina fans love to throw around those take away Trevor and Deshaun and this is Dabo, but if you take away those 7 years, Dabo's record against South Carolina is not good.
Yeah.
But the reason why I say that is because, like, those were times where our team was head and shoulders above South Carolina's team, like, talent wise, and take away those years, all the years where it's been competitive, we're not faring very well. So, I think I might lean towards yes, fact, just because I think it would start to signal the beginning of the end if changes like you mentioned weren't made. But I agree with your assessment that a loss would trigger those changes.
Our Week 12 picks, a big week for Matthew and I. After a couple rough weeks, Matthew put 3 points on the board, so that brings the season total. Matthew had 3 points last week with his total of 21 points on the year. The only problem with that is I also had 3 points, so no movement for Matthew, and I have 30 points on the year, so still a 9-point lead. Any thoughts on any of these games we gave out last week?
No, I really didn't watch a terribly large amount of football, but I did want to point out my underdog. My one miss was Rutgers at Penn State. That was Rutgers picked to lose by 20.5. They lost by 21, so I was 1 point shy of going perfect and at least making up 1 point on the year against Drew. But Drew did have a close one too. He had the under Georgia State LSU under 71.5, and that hit 70. So, but he did get that one right. But it was really close to being no.
Yeah, had those gone your way, you would have made a little bit of a ground. And whenever you text me and told me that I went 3-1, I just assumed it was that Georgia State LSU game, because I was kind of checking scores periodically in the first half, and I think it was like 35-14 at the half. So I was like, oh, this is definitely going to go over. But evidently the scoring slowed way down there in the second half. So, all right, time to give out our picks for Week 13. Every week, Matthew and I give out a favorite, an underdog, an over, and an under. Matthew, what is your favorite of the week?
Staying in the state this week, going Clemson -7 at South Carolina. We'll talk about it and after this segment once we kind of preview the South Carolina game a little bit, but I think this one is going to be a little closer. But after last year, I think we have a lot of motivation coming into this game, and just the way last year ended with abandoning the run, bunch of turnovers, and just giving South Carolina the game almost. I think Clemson has a point to prove this time.
I am going with the game you mentioned earlier, the great state of Kentucky. Kentucky versus Louisville. Louisville is a 7-point favorite at home. Wildcats off of a tough loss in Columbia last week. And anytime they faced a team with a pulse, have fallen. They've really not beaten anyone of note. I think Louisville wins this one pretty handedly.
All right, and moving to underdog, I'm going Virginia, who's a 2.5-point dog it's at home, but they're a 2.5-point dog against Virginia Tech this week. The Battle of Virginia. Virginia's been kind of getting hot a little bit towards the end of the season, and this is a rivalry game, so they're always going to show up for that. So I think Tony Elliott might right the ship a little bit here.
I am going with another rivalry game just south of South Carolina in the state of Georgia. The Bulldogs are a 24-point favorite at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. 24 points is a lot of points. The Bulldogs have struggled at times to get the offense moving. Georgia Tech's offense is significantly better than it has been in years, and they've been in most of the games this year, and I don't think this weekend will be any different in Atlanta.
Interesting. That'll be maybe a spot mover for us here. Just keeping it all in the Southeast this week, I'm going to Alabama. Alabama at Auburn. That's plus or minus 49 right now, and I don't know why. I could see both teams. I mean, Alabama might get 49 on their own.
Go ahead and change that number to 48.5 because I got a better line on it. So there will be no movement on this over pick because I too think that one will far exceed the 48.5 points.
All right. And then lastly, I'm actually going to move this line also because I received word earlier today that it moved today. So I'm going with the more friendly line of Iowa, Nebraska. Right now, when I picked it, it was plus or minus 26. I believe it moved up to 26.5. I think you might have mentioned that earlier, Drew. But So I have that. I think Iowa's setting records for lowest over-unders in Vegas history, and they hit the under every time. I think it's free money on Iowa.
I too think it's free money. That's why I went with it. So our over and under are exactly the same this week. I was able to find it at 26.5 if you want to give yourself that half point there.
I'll take that. I really didn't want to pick it because of the full number of 26. I was like, it's going to be 26. I just know it. So now I'm happy to have that half point now.
Yeah, within a 20-minute period when I sent that text, it went from a 25.5 to a 26.5. And I went back and looked at some of those games. It's going to be an ugly game, and I don't see them scoring more than 26. So really the only games that matter are our favorite and underdog pick, which kind of makes my Georgia Tech game all that more important.
Well, I think, like you said, it's rivalry week and anything can happen. So I don't think that anything's out of the question on the board right now.
All right. Wow. Best week of college football. It's time to preview the Clemson, South Carolina series. If you follow us on Twitter, we've been having a lot of fun with Gamecock fans this week, throwing some shade at them about Alec Murdoch, Hootie and the Blowfish, their former president who referred to the school as the University of California. So a fun week on Twitter. Fun at Little Brother. So before I get into any of these stats and stuff, do you have any initial thoughts on this game, Matthew?
Not really. I think I mentioned it earlier, but right now I think we're out-talenting South Carolina's roster almost down the board. There's a couple exceptions, like Spencer Rattler probably is a wash on Cade Klubnik to me. I think they have similar ceilings and similar floors, really. So, but like last year, the talent gap is not something that can't be made up with turnovers or poor play scheming. So, It'll be close, but I think as long as Clemson plays clean football, they have this game.
All right, so taking a look at this series, Clemson leads the overall series 72-43 with 4 ties. Stat I threw out on Twitter this week, Clemson has more wins in Columbia with 53. South Carolina's all-time in the series, and that's even with South Carolina having the home field advantage up until 1960, where every single game was played in Columbia. Clemson, as I mentioned, 53 wins on the road, 32 losses, 3 ties. The last meeting we've discussed was November 26th of last year. Tigers fall by 1 point, 31-30 to the Gamecocks. This current streak obviously is 1 with South Carolina, and currently South Carolina is 5-6, 3-5 in the SEC, and 1 win away from hitting their season point total. So this Saturday will be the 120th meeting between the two programs. Clemson is seeking its 150th win since the start of 2011. Clemson will join Alabama as the only program with 150 games won since 2011. Before I throw out some other stats, Matthew, it's been a couple weeks, but I have a trivia question for you.
All right, let's do it.
When was the last time South Carolina led the all-time series between the two programs?
I think it's going to be a long time ago. Can I get like a hint? Do you have somewhere like where the series started or what year it started in?
The series started in 1895, I believe.
Okay. Then I'll say the last time South Carolina had the all-time series lead, I will say 1954.
You are way off. The 1896.
Oh, wow.
The Gamecocks won the first ever game between the two programs. Clemson went on to win the next 2, taking the lead in the series, and have never given it up. So it has been 125 years and 8 days, or a total of 45,663 consecutive days since South led this series.
That one's interesting. I guess I could have probably thought through that, but good question.
The Tigers have surrendered 1 touchdown and only 13 total points in their last 12 games of play at Williams-Brice Stadium. Going back to 2017, the Tigers won 34-10. In 2019, 38-3, held them scoreless. Tigers win 30-0. The Tigers are also attempting to produce its 6th 200-yard rushing game of the season. It would be the first time they've done so since they did it 10 times in 2019. Threw this stat out there earlier, but the Tigers have more wins in Columbia, 53, than South Carolina has in the entire series. They got 43 total there. And then a little history here. This game has only been played 1 time on Thanksgiving Day. That was in 1963. The contest was moved from Saturday before Thanksgiving to Thanksgiving Day due to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. As I said, that's the only time the two teams have met on Thanksgiving. So, all right. Time to give out our score predictions, give our thoughts. What are we thinking, Matthew?
Well, I kind of already talked about it, but I think like talent-wise, we're down the roster. Clemson has the advantage here. But like I said, it's not something that bad football is going to cover up. Bad football is going to show the gaps and make it easier for the less talented team to get into the game. So really the key to the game for me is limiting turnovers, or at least winning the turnover margin. And I know against North Carolina, we had some bad turnovers. Even on that fake punt, Tyler Davis fumbled the ball. Even it was 4th down, he got stopped anyway. But you had Shipley fumble inside the red zone. Mafah might have been clean on Saturday, but it's just not been a good look for the Tigers this season, and that is going to be detrimental, and we'll be staring down the barrel of 2 losses in a row to Carolina if that continues.
I think that this game is Clemson's to lose. Like you pointed out, it's the more talented team. I think the big factor, as we've touched on throughout this episode, limiting turnovers and beating Shipley and Mafah. Last year, you stopped giving the ball to Shipley. He has done some damage against the Gamecocks in years past. That combination of him and Mafah should be enough to beat the Gamecocks, and I think cover the spread that you threw out there of 7 points. If the Tigers can do that, the hostility of the fans in Williams-Brice Stadium won't matter. So you got a score prediction for Saturday.
Yeah, I'm pulling this one from the show notes again, but I did some math to get to this one because I didn't think the score was going to be 53-32 or 72-43. So my score prediction is 29-19 Clemson. I might have even predicted that same score for another game this season, but 29-19. Just for reference, that is 29 is the lead that Clemson has in the overall series, and 19 is the lead that Clemson has in the away series, just at Columbia. So that's my numbers for this week.
That might have been your pick last week because that does sound very familiar.
I don't think it was last week, but I can actually pull up my one from last week. But I was only like a touchdown away last week too, because or actually I don't have it written down. Never mind. I think I did like 38-20 or 38-19 maybe, something around there, and it was really close to hitting again.
Well, my pick is very similar to yours. You said 29-19. I'm throwing out 30-21 in favor of the Tigers. Looking forward to a big matchup in Columbia. The only downside, I love night games at Clemson, hate night games away from Clemson, not necessarily for an advantage standpoint, but having to sit around and wait all day for this game to happen. So the nice thing about it is we got a lot of good games to watch on Saturday to be the appetizer for this big matchup here. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for Chris Phillips for coming on, and join us next week as we review the South Carolina game and preview the conference championships coming up. Peace.
Peace.